What's going on, Dungeon Fighters? I'm Muscular Thumbs, and this is another Stories of the Past. The topic for this video is about the old awakening system compared to the new awakening system. The biggest motivator for this video is one complaint in particular I read. Now don't get me wrong, new players complaining about the new awakening system is fine in my book. You're entitled to your opinion, and if you feel the new awakening system needs to change, then that's cool. But one complaint that I read was, let's say, a bit unsettling. The complaint was made by a veteran, with veteran in quotations, asking to change the new awakening system back to the old one. This person claimed that the old awakening system was much easier than the new one. Now for you other veterans watching this video, you'll probably question the validity of that post because what kind of veteran would prefer the old awakening system? The logic must be pretty twisted to justify such a thing, or the person was lying about being a veteran player. New players, or more generally, players that have never experienced the old awakening system, are probably confused. What's so bad about the old awakening system? Well, I'll get into that in just a moment, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll understand the pain and horrors you had to go through in order to awaken in the past, and the myriad of other problems that just made the whole experience exponentially worse. New awakening materials. Before we dive into the old, let's talk about the current awakening system. In order to awaken in DFO today, you'll need to gather a ton of materials. This is primarily where all the complaints come from. You'll need 10 red and white cubes, 100 superior iron and hardeners, 60 chaos stone debris, 80 seals of Empress, and 120 seals of Emperor Helm. Awakening today can be quite a costly venture. But you need to understand that this is a temporary problem. Eventually, once the game settles down and more people hit cap, the materials for awakening will become really cheap. It's simply supply and demand. Right now, as the supply is low but the demand is high, because everyone wants to awaken, the materials naturally become costly. Later down the road, supply will be high while demand will be low, so materials will become cheaper. Not only that, why awaken at all if you don't want to spend money right now? There's no added advantage or disadvantage from awakening now or awakening later besides not having a few new skills, but getting to cap without those skills is completely doable. Rise and I are both awakening later once the materials become cheaper. Also, if you are nowhere near awakening yet, and you have yet to watch the beginner's guides we released, I highly suggest you do. We'll put a link in the description and on the screen right now to a playlist with all 3 of those videos. We had originally advised you to collect every material you come across, and if you did that, you should have already collected much of the materials needed to awaken already. If not, then get started now. New awakening system. Besides the material I talked about, you also need to clear Tower of Death a few times. But let's get into the fun stuff, the actual awakening. Awakening unlocks a new skill and a passive. Normally, you'd need SP for skills, but the awakening skill is different. It levels automatically. Not only that, there are technically 3 stages of power. To understand this concept, know that there are 9 total levels in awakening you can possibly get, and every 3 levels is a new stage of power. So level 3 would be stage 1, level 6 would be stage 2, and level 9 would be stage 3. However, at level 70 cap, you can only hit level 5 in Awakening, while at level 85 cap, you can only hit level 8. So how can you get to the next stage in power? You'll need an outside source to give you the extra level in Awakening. This normally comes as an equip. In fact, upon Awakening, you are given a weapon that automatically gives you +1 in Awakening. Normally, a player that wants to use the next stage in power would put an equip like that in their item slots, and they switch to that equip when they're about to use their awakening. For awakening passives, you'll actually need SP, but after the revamp, passives are actually useful now. In the past, it was a rare event for someone to max out their awakening passives. But enough about the new and current, let's go back down memory lane and talk about the old awakening process. It's something a lot of veterans like to call the beginning of pain, that is. A lot of pain. The old awakening will always have a special place in my heart. More like, I can't even forget it if I tried to. There are reasons why many veterans bow down to the current version of DFO, and I'll be covering as many as I can in regards to this topic. Let's talk about the process to awaken first. You know, I'm almost afraid to divulge the requirements in order to awaken in the old process, but it must be done. Let's talk about the first requirement. You need 700 victory points first and foremost. Back in the days of the old DFO, victory points were something gained from winning matches in PvP. You had entire services set up by people to trade wins in PvP in order to get enough points, but at a cost, of course. Sometimes reaching in the millions. 700 points wasn't easily obtained either. You needed to win quite a few matches before you got that much. New players will cry out, "How ludicrous!" And yes, you'd be right. That alone is enough to piss quite a few people off, especially to folks who only PvE in DFO. But believe me, this is the easiest of the requirements I'm about to list out to you. The next two requirements involve completing the two ancient dungeons, Vilmark and Relics. Ancients are a special kind of dungeon, and by special, I mean insanely difficult. There are gimmicks to each room, and by messing up even a tiny bit means death to the entire party. Doing it solo is impossible unless you were over-leveled, so you needed a party, and a single mistake by a single party member would result in the demise of the entire group. Like I said, it was not fun, and you had to clear both of these ancients 5 times. But wait, there's more. In order to even gain access to Vilmark, the second ancient, you needed to do a quest. This quest still brings manly tears to my eyes whenever I think about it. It was the Danjin Doll quest. If the previous requirement didn't bring you despair, then this surely did. The Danjin Doll quest was completely RNG based, and in order to do it, you had to give Danjin 3 red cubes and 100k. That's 300 red cube fragments, by the way. Now you might be thinking, well, that's not too bad. No, that's really bad. Back in the day, getting red cube frags was hard. As far as I can tell, they just didn't pop out as much in disassemblers, so accumulating them took forever. You had to buy them, and they went for around 1.2k per frag back then. And the quest is RNG. This means you have a chance at failing. Sometimes when you fail, you get a chance to get a title called the Lucky 7. Some people had to do the quest 20 or more times in order to gain access to Vilmark. They would spend up to 10 million to gain access. If you're lucky, you can get the doll within 5 tries, but don't count on it. Rise, naturally, is very lucky, so he managed to get the doll within 5 tries each time he awakened, but as for me, it took me over 10. Alright, now from what I've explained so far, you might be thinking, oh man, it's finally over. Sorry, but it isn't. There are still 2 more requirements to awaken even after this part. You need to gather 50 pieces of Terranite. Well, that doesn't sound too bad, you think? You'd be wrong. Terranite only drops in Vilmark, so gathering 50 pieces means you need to keep running it. It was a real pain in the ass. And finally, after finishing that quest, you need to also bring 10 white cubes, 10 red cubes, 100 superior hardeners, and 100 superior irons. You know how every time you level up in DFO, you gain stats? Well, in the old DFO, the stat growth was different between post and pre-awakening for 2 specific classes, the Witch and the Female Grappler. This meant that there was a difference between awakening as early as possible and later. In the new system, you don't have to worry about that. You can awaken later at your leisure with no worries about potential losses due to min and maxing. What makes it stranger is that the Female Grappler was better off awakening as soon as possible, while the Witch was better off awakening later. It seriously made no sense due to how the stat growth worked. Skill resets. Skill resets is an important topic we need to cover. A lot of new players may not be aware of this, but the skill resets was not free in the old DFO. You had to pay Nexon $20 in order to reset your skills. It was an expensive and costly process. Veterans back then could spend weeks developing a build if they knew they would get a reset thanks to an event or something, since it was a pretty rare opportunity to fix all that's wrong with your current build. This also meant you needed to prepare your build in advance before deciding to jump into this game. I'm not done yet. We also had one skill set. This means we did not have a skill set for PvP and PvE. They weren't separate. Now, you new players may not be aware of this, but there are major differences between PvP and PvE builds. And back then, a player with a PvP build in PvE would just do really poorly in PvE compared to other classes. Grinding was a painful experience, and I'm glad we don't have to do that anymore. But this also meant that if you had a PvE only build, you would still need to somehow get 700 victory points needed to awaken. So you had the PvP too. A lot of people just resorted to paying for win trading instead of trying to PvP with their PvE only build. Some people tried a hybrid PvP and PvE build, but while that may help you out during awakening, doing something like that would be detrimental later on in PvP and PvE. Anyway, this meant that many PvP only players paid people to run Ancients with them. Those were desperate times and a huge money waster. Do it for the cool. Don't worry, I'm just getting warmed up here. We aren't done just yet. There used to be a saying between my friends and I in the old DFO. Do it for the cool. After finally awakening and getting everything and anything behind you, you think you're done. Finally, it's over. But there's that awakening skill. Unlike today, the awakening skill cost SP. Most of the passives back then were useless, so I won't go into that. The SP cost for awakening was tremendous, and because you don't have free skill resets, spending points in awakening was a risky venture, and most of the time, it didn't pan out. For most classes, there were better areas to spend SP in. By spending SP in awakening, you dramatically lower your PvE potential. Spending points in it as a PvP person would basically eliminate you from the high-end PvP competition entirely. So the saying, do it for the cool, was born. Just get one level in the awakening. It's useless, sure, but it does look damn cool. And that's what truly matters in the end, looking cool. This was a long video, but I'm glad I got it off my chest. Now, you should understand why the new awakening system is vastly superior to the old one. As always, thanks for watching through the entire video. I'm Muscular Thumbs, and look at that sub. Yum 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 yum. Delicioso.